the thing.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
All right, so we got, let's see. Drew, can you hear me? Drew, give me a thumbs up. So we got Drew. He says, can't wait for this. I grabbed Andrew's book on April 9th, and I'm about halfway through. Wow, so much great research in there. Drewski from Minnesota. So that's obviously your older brother, Andrew, for sure. But let's give me a thumbs up, people, if you can hear me, because I'm on my headphones, and I've never done headphones in my audio. Andrew says he can hear me, but let's see if the audience can. Hold on just a second. Can you hear me? And all right, so I see one. Hey, wait, how many? All right, I got one. I got one. Oh, we're not on LinkedIn. Oh man. All right. What happened to LinkedIn? All right, so we're on Twitter. We're on my two yellow pages, my two YouTube channels, and both my Facebook channels, but we're not on LinkedIn. Wonder why that is. Weird. Hey, Finney. All right, so we got a guy. Okay, John Benedict from Facebook is checking in. Good. I still don't see any thumbs up or anything, though, Andrew. Hang tight for just a second. I don't see anyone commenting. I wonder if I'm on the wrong. All right, let me hold on just a second, Andrew. Let me go to. I think I might have logged into the wrong.
Now I can't hear you.
Just disconnect that.
You're back. Maybe I should take over the show.
All right. So can you hear me now? You can hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, sweet. So I don't know what the hell happened. All right. So we got Tina says, somebody's okay, good. Negative Ghost Rider. Yes, they can hear me now. All right, sweet. It looks like we're good. I don't know what the hell happened. All right, so hang tight for just a second, Andrew. Let me look at my other YouTube thing here. Let's just see. Hold on, my main YouTube channel. We'll go here. All right. So, all right, there we go. All right, I see the comments. All right. There we go. Looks like we're good here. So for some reason, I'm only able to see comments. No, it looks like we're good. All right, good. Looks like we're good. All right, sweet. So Andrew Biggs is back with us with his book right here, which he sent me, and you'll notice there is no signature copy. What the hell?
Well, man? I wanted to make it, if you want to resell it, then you can do it.
I already put it out for orders, and because negativity always draws more views. Everyone's like, no, I don't want it. I don't want any positive stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dude, come on. Let's get going, Josh. For God's sakes, your two channels are enough. Sorry. Is that Tina? I think it's, I don't remember. Only my computer audience can silence me. Oh boy. Yeah, and that's funny. I think I like Josh better quiet. That's pretty funny. That's pretty all right. So Andrew, tell us first and foremost how so this is written AIE Press, American Enterprise Institute Press. So how would it just give us? I'm curious about first. I want to get into. Remember, guys, if you guys got questions, put them in all caps, and I'll star them, and then we'll get to them. But I want to hear so this is obviously published, not on self-published by Amazon. So you're a firm that you work for AEI.
Yeah.
Publish this for you. How did the genesis of writing this book come to
the genesis goes back a little bit further than it should. It took me longer. I originally thought, I can get this thing done in a year. And then I joined this Puerto Rico oversight board and all these things happened. So it took longer. But the genesis was first, sort of my boss is like, hey, you're at the stage of your career. Maybe you should write a book. I'm like, but then,
wait a second, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, really. But I got a grant from the Smith Richardson Foundation to do it, so they're obviously interested in doing it. But the real motivation of the sort of the narrative of, okay, look, everybody says we have this retirement crisis and we don't. If you go back literally like 20 years ago, I was working at the Social Security Administration. I kind of ran the Office of Policy there. We did what's called micro simulation modeling. It's a super detailed modeling of the population. You project them forward into retirement. This was right. So this was like 2006.
Yeah.
And this is one like the Boston College National Retirement Research or Retirement Risk Index came out. You started getting this other thing saying, really, we're very underprepared. And I just remember talking, at this point, I was focusing mostly on Social Security reforms. I worked in the Bush White House in this. But I remember talking to one of the career staff who really kind of shepherded this model and built it. And he's like, we're not projecting what they're getting.
Right.
They're saying with this big retirement crisis, that's not what we're doing. And this was, tens of millions of dollars thrown into the development, started in the mid 90s. So this is, all these outside peer reviews. So it just got me thinking, okay, why do we, what accounts for this? I mean, everybody thinks we're doomed. And it was just one of those things when you started pulling on the string, you're like, this is really interesting. Because
and it's about 2005 or so. You're thinking, okay, guys.
That's when I started thinking about it.
And the whole thing started, like the retirement crisis started in like the mid 90s or so. So
that's when the narrative started. Yeah. But it was really around 2005, you started getting, you had eBree, you had the Boston College, you had that book by Edward Wolff that came out from Economic Policy Institute, all saying, we're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things where what got me thinking was these guys who are doing this modeling at Social Security. But then when you start pulling at the threads of all these different studies, as I kind of said on my Substack the other day, there's always something you're like, well, that makes no sense. There's always something where if you just pull on the string, the entire thing falls apart. And then if you look at other data, how much we're saving today versus the past, we're saving a ton more for retirement today. So you're like, how does this happen? Yeah. And so it just became topic after topic of trying to explain, it's not a retirement book in the sense of like, I got a chapter on required minimum distributions. I don't give a fuck about that. It was, the fortunate thing with the book is I only wrote on things I found interesting. So it's not sort of like a guidebook for somebody. It's just interesting stuff about how did we get this narrative so wrong? And what do the data actually show? And the data show a much, much more positive picture.
So, all right. So you're sitting there in the Social Security Administration, and they're saying we're not showing this, and yet you see this book by Edward Wolff, who was published by EPI, if memory. So I think it was in your article you said the Taurus left-wing economics think tank, and you're like, I don't like, and then you just start in your own kind of mind. You're like, this doesn't make sense because we're showing something different. And then you start in the back of your mind saying, like, when did you like go full throttle into, debunking this stuff? Like in 2012 in that Wall Street Journal article, or what was the impetus for that?
It was even earlier than that. I mean, even when I was at Social Security, I remember looking at the Wolff study, and there was another John Gets, but anyway, I'm pulling a mental freeze on it. Yeah. And both these studies said, people are not going to have enough. And then again, you look at the details, you go, how are you doing it? Both of them looked at the amount of savings people had today, assumed they didn't save anything else the rest of their career, and said, you won't have enough for retirement. Well, sure. But that's not, what does that show? As I put it, it's like, look, if you stop saving for retirement, there's a good chance you won't have enough in retirement. The interesting thing about the studies that make that assumption, though, they find a lot of people are still going to be okay. Even if you're 50 years old, you say, I'm just giving up on that 401k thing. A lot of them still be okay. But the whole thing, it just doesn't even make sense. Why would you do something like that? And then you get some of the other things. I mean, I mentioned like, say the Boston College thing, and I know the Boston College people well. I've written with them. I like them very much.
Now you're taking a lot of arrows for you aligning with Alicia about the.
I like her very much. She's very smart. But say like when they look at the income people have in retirement, they think like half of Americans won't have enough income in retirement. The income in retirement they look at is Social Security defined benefit pensions or withdrawals from 401ks. If you actually look at the data, I mean, people, if you're like a farmer, small businessman, you got all sorts of other kind of income coming in, but like 25% of the income of people 65 and over is earnings. People continue to work.
I have what I'm saying, man.
And my point of this is that money's got to go somewhere. You can either add it to the income people have, and then recalculate your index on that. Or you can assume, okay, if you have earnings, we're going to push off the date of retirement, which means you get more in Social Security, more from your pensions, more from your 401k, because you have fewer years to cover. Okay, or you could do that too. You can't do neither of the two.
Right.
You can't ignore 25% of the income that retirees have. And the funny, or there's the other one, this National Institute for Retirement Security. They had a study, came out in 2012 or 2013. They're like the front group for the defined benefit industry. So it's like all this, institute, but it's they're, I don't want to say propaganda arm, but kind of what they do. But anyway, they've got a study saying Americans are $14 trillion short of what they need to have a secure retirement. And you're like, okay, how do you get this?
Right.
Now, one of the things they do is they looked at the amount of benefits people were promised by defined benefit pensions, but then they say they're underfunded, which they indeed are, and assumed the underfunding is done entirely by reducing benefits. So the unfunded liabilities for public sector pensions, they're probably $3 trillion or something, and then you have some in the private sector as well. But the odd thing there, first, it's unrealistic. The vast majority of benefits get paid even if the pension's underfunded. But the thing was funny to me is like, you work for the defined benefit pensions, and you're assuming the entire funding gap is done by cutting benefits. And they do this study saying we're all underfunded, not enough retirement savings gap, so on and so forth. Therefore, we need more defined benefit pensions. So your own study says these are terrible pensions. It's stuff like modeling this sort of stuff going forward is incredibly complicated. The model that I worked with at Social Security called MINT, which is Model of Income for the Near Term.
Is that available for public or no?
No, it's because it's based on Social Security earnings records, so it's all confidential. Gotcha. So you can't just go in and tinker with it, but there's publications done with it. But I'm just telling you, it's unbelievably complex, the stuff they do.
Right.
And so sure, things can go wrong. But the funny thing is when you look at some of these studies that are widely cited of, Americans aren't going to have enough, it's not some complex, they didn't do their statistical modeling right. It's like, they decide to ignore 1/4 of the income the retirees have.
Or like you said,
pensions collapse. It's really simple errors.
Or like you said with Wolf, he just said, you're 47 years old. We're going to assume that you work till you're 65, and thus you'll get your, AWI index for your benefits on Social Security. They'll adjust, and then you're going to stop putting anything into your contributions, and you're not going to draw any interest. I was like, when I heard, I was like, that can't possibly be. And then I don't know if it was you or somebody else. So there's a guy, Nevin Adams, I think. Yeah, it was that guy on your blog. I don't know who that guy is, but I follow him. And I said on EBRI, he said there's another one, the Pew Charitable Trust. I said, what? I said, I can't believe these guys are. You don't have to answer. I'm just like, it makes no sense at all. I'm like, it's crazy to me.
This is going back a couple of months ago. Morningstar had this study. They've got this great model of retirement income, blah, blah, blah. But the study's like, okay, some huge percentage of retirees are going to run out of money due to long-term care, nursing homes and all that. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So, I'm me. I'm like, okay, let's look through this statistical index and the methodology and all that. And what you find out is they assume that 100% of nursing home costs are paid out of pocket. So they're assuming away not just Medicare and Medicaid, but all private insurance. Right. In reality, if you look at the data, retirees today pay 14% of long-term care costs out of pocket. The rest is from these other sources. They're assuming all that stuff goes away. Right. Look, people are smart guys. And they're smart enough to put together this whole model. I'm like, this is insane. Why would you do this? And there's a practical reason. Modeling Medicaid is a total pain in the ass. They didn't do it. But then don't write the paper. But you can't just say, asterisks, private insurance, Medicare and Medicaid go out of business and you're on your own. All right. So it's a really weird, and this makes it kind of entertaining because you see one of these studies and you're like, spot the difference. Vanguard had one maybe a year and a half ago, again, very, very pessimistic. And in the study, they say, look, we know from reading people like Mike Hurd and Suzanne Roetter from RAND, that if you look at the actual spending patterns of people in retirement, they spend significantly less as they age, even when you include healthcare costs. They're like, we know that. So they've read the stuff, they acknowledge it's correct.
Right.
Well, we're going to assume everyone wants to spend the same in inflation-adjusted terms throughout the retirement. This has a dramatic effect on how much you need to save. It probably doubles the amount you need to save. And so I'm like, you clearly understand the issue of what spending paths look like in retirement. And you're like, well, we're just going to ignore that. I'm like, why? Why go to the trouble of doing? I mean, look, there's motivations here in the sense sometimes people want to be like better safe than sorry, and I get that. Other times, look, you got a product to sell. I mean, look, I bet Vanguard. And
the defined benefit guys have a product to sell. Right,
everybody's got a product to sell.
And annuity guys, they got a product to sell. Yeah, everybody's got a product to sell.
And the news media's got a product to sell, which is clicking on the stories. A lot of people politically, they're very distrustful of the U.S. retirement savings system because it does leave a lot to the discretion of individuals, and they don't think that's going to work. Right. So they've got the incentive to play this stuff up. So it's all this sort of, I was going to say a circle something or other, but it's all everybody's, let's just say circular citation. Circular citations is actually the good one, where one of these groups footnotes the next group, who footnotes the next group, and they're all going around in a circle, one crappy study footnoting the other. But it's just nobody really has the incentive to speak the truth, which is, look, the retirement system's working pretty well.
Retirees it's working great. That's the thing.
So I'm not saying there's no problems. People are like, oh, you say it's perfect. I don't say it's perfect, but I'm saying compared to the other problems we have in America, retirement is maybe top 5, but I'm not even sure that. It's the system's working okay.
Now, you partnered recently with John Chauvin over at Stanford, and what's his take on social? And I've never met the guy. I've read him. I've done videos on some of the stuff he's done. Mm-hmm. What's his take on the retirement topic? Is he is, I hate to say pessimistic as
where is John? Okay, Chauvin is. I mean, he's got to be 80 now. He's right. A legendary Stanford professor with a real focus on Social Security retirement issues. That's a real good question. Where is he on Social Security? He's sort of a moderate Democrat. So he'd be kind of like, let's split the difference between tax increases and benefit reductions. Yeah. I don't know. I would be very, very surprised if he were in the retirement crisis camp. Yeah. I just don't get that feeling at all. But I don't know whether I've asked him specifically. We just wrote a piece together. It was really very Social Security related. Yeah. But he knows where I am on the retirement stuff. And you'd think if he thought I was completely wrong, he mentioned it. I mean, economists are not the types to keep stuff to themselves. So if he thought I was like really full of it, I would have known. I suspect he's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I was just because I saw that paper you had written with him, and I've been a big fan of that guy for a long time.
He's a very, very sharp guy.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, there's no way he was probably on the liberal side of things, but there's no way he's thinking, oh my goodness. Like, the funny thing is, Andrew, that the Boston College. So if you look at the National Retirement Risk Index, they assume your expenses are going to go up with inflation. But then they have this other piece that this is part of the article I sent you yesterday. Do retirees want constant increasing or decreasing consumption? All right. So this goes, oh, there you go. And so the National Retirement Risk Index from the Boston College, Center for Retirement Research, they say your expenditures are going to go up each and every year inflation. Then this own article they published in 2021 says, no, it actually drops, but not as much as other people say. And I was like, you can't have, these things are mutually exclusive. Yeah. You can't be simultaneous. I was like, I'm just sitting there thinking, and I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm just like, it's almost like,
how does it all make sense?
It doesn't make any sense. And I'm just like,
the sort of what you call the spending path in retirement. Look, I've used it a million times where I assume constant spending in retirement. Social Security COLAs kind of implicitly assume that, and that's fine as sort of a safety net, base of income. But a lot of times I would assume steady consumption, because then you just assume they buy a CPI indexed annuity at retirement. It sort of makes the math easy. Yeah. And that's kind of one reason people do it. It makes the math easy. Yeah.
Right.
But going back, this is probably late 80s, early 90s. You had research finding, look, spending drops a lot in retirement. And there's like Doug Bernheim and the first conclusion from that was, it must be that people haven't saved enough for retirement. They get to retirement, they realize, I don't have enough money. And so they start spending less. And that's one reasonable conclusion. But like then you had subsequent researchers who looked at where the spending reduction was coming from.
Right.
And the reduction was coming from things like food. And you're like, okay, why would you reduce spending on things like food, not reduce things like charitable giving?
Charitable contribution, right, exactly.
And those go up. So you're like, okay, how does this make sense? Why cut down this necessity? The reason when they do more sophisticated research is people are eating out less. I mean, think if you're going to your office every day, you're eating out every day. Often you're eating out at night because you're busy. When you're retired, you got a lot more time. So you tend to eat more at home. When they look at the calories people eat, it doesn't decline. They're not starving themselves. They're just spending less. And you get other things like they shop around more. You know, a retiree household and a working age household buying the same item, you'll often find the retirees pay less because they've got time to shop around. So then you get this stuff like Mike Hurd and Suzanne Rowetter at Rand, who do excellent work. And they've first put a lot of work into tracing what happens at spending in retirement. And from between 65 and 95, real spending drops by around half.
Yeah.
You're spending a
real
lot
spending, folks. That means adjusted for inflation. That's real spending.
And it's one of those things. Like one explanation is they're running out of money. This is like one of the articles you cited said, "Oh, people are running out of money." And you could find some people who do that. But when Hurd and Rowetter even look at high wealth households who are clearly not running out of money, their spending declines a lot as well. So they've done subsequent research trying to figure out why it is people spend less. So they'll look at what they spend on. They ask survey questions. Okay, do you spend less than you did 5 years ago? Why? And the answer most people give is, I just get less enjoyment out of spending. And this is, for economists, like the marginal utility of money declines more quickly or whatever. Just one way to think about it. If you're 65, you're like, okay, I want to have food, clothing, and shelter, but I'm going to spend some money on a new sports car or a cruise because you're still healthy. You get a lot of enjoyment from that. At 85, the idea of schlepping around to a cruise doesn't sound so good. And so that's the pattern. And so it's basically, if you look at Hurd and Rowetter, this is the thing you want to figure out. Why is spending declining? Everything they're getting points towards, it's this nexus of health status and the money you get and the utility you get from spending money.
Absolutely.
When you're healthy, spending more money gets you more enjoyment than when you're unhealthy. It's like the go, slow go, no go. When you're in the slow go, you just don't want to spend as much. And I saw this with my dad early in retirement, spent a ton of money. Then later he just didn't. He had tons of money, but he just didn't spend it.
You didn't need to. He's like, I don't get the enjoyment. Exactly.
So the way this plays in is, just to give you an example, when Hurd and Rowetter, I was a reviewer in one of their papers a couple of years ago, and they basically found that if you look at a realistic spending path in retirement, you need something like 16%. You will spend something like 16% less in retirement than if you assume constant inflation adjusted spending. You're like, okay, that's not such a big deal, huh? Imagine that half your income in retirement comes from Social Security, the other half comes from your savings, just to keep it simple. That doesn't mean your Social Security is fixed. Your savings make up the difference. So if you're getting half from Social Security, it means you don't need 16% less savings in your retirement account. You need 32%. It is a dramatic effect. And so if you do this, and the Boston College people did a paper on this using the retirement risk index, and they said, okay, if we assume the different spending paths, what does that do to the percentage of retirees who we consider at risk? It has a very large effect. And what it appears, and I don't want to name names, I've had people, should I say, involved in that, who are like, yeah, you kind of convinced me now that this spending pattern, they're doing okay. This isn't people running out of money. So it just changes the picture dramatically. But the interesting thing, and this was a piece I wrote a week or two ago where I forget who the guy's writing for Dow Jones or something.
Yes.
He cites these statistics from Social Security, how much people depend on Social Security.
Yes.
15% of people.
And real quick, Andrew, that's on Andrew's Substack too, by the way. So I'll put a link into Andrew's Substack. You can subscribe for free because Andrew's been plugging some serious stuff out there lately. And I'll put the link on Andrew's Little Known Facts Substack.
Little Known Facts.
And
but anyway, this guy, he's writing, and I apologize, I forget his name, but he cites these statistics. Says something around 15% of retirees get 90% or more of their income from Social Security.
Yeah.
And he's like, that shows we're doomed. I'm like, God, what is the appropriate
it's
number
Paul
for that? I don't
Brandis,
know.
Andrew. Paul Brandis.
Okay. But if you went back like 10 or 15 years ago, Social Security said it wasn't 15% who got 90% or more. It was 35% or something like that. And what was happening was the data they were using were bad. And, I was sort of involved in that. The data they used didn't count money you got from your retirement account, like your 401k or IRA. When you include that, it drops from 35 to 15. But the interesting thing is you would think that after a really dramatic change in the income numbers, once you include income from 401ks, the median income for retirees increases by almost a third, which is a huge increase. You would think that would change a couple people's minds about what's going on in retirement. It doesn't change anything. It was the conclusions are exactly the same, and they just change the numbers, or they don't change the numbers, but it's just the conclusions never, ever change. You could have God himself come down to earth and say the retirement system is working well. And, Teresa Ghilarducci, some of that say, it's still no good. There is nothing you can do with some people to show, it's the definition of science is something that can be falsified. And people have used that they refuse to, there's nothing you could present to them that would change their minds.
Well, it's kind of like, the funny thing is, if you look at the stats, the survey consumer finance, or even just Social Security, you're like, how many people actually own their homes outright or over 65? And the answer is a strong majority own their own homes outright. Do. All right. So you're like, so if people are running out of money, then in fact, there shouldn't be that many people that own their own homes outright as a strong majority from 2010 to 2015. And you don't see any of that. You actually see, it's not even Wolfie's thing that he just read, Ed Wolf. But if you just look at survey consumer finances, the net worth of people, and you talk about this, 55 and older, has gone up and up and up. So if they were running out of money, and that's the reason for their spending to decline, then why is their net worth growing and they're not taking on debt against their home? So the idea would be like they're running out of money, but their net worth is growing. Makes absolutely no sense at all. But it doesn't matter because they have this blinder on that they have to push the narrative that it's I watched Larry Kotlikoff, from Boston University, who's is a big gadfly, but I like Larry. He's crazy in a good way. I'm just like, I can't believe the stuff that some of it's anti-Trump, and I get that, but it's like, I'm just like, I can't believe the stuff that these guys are perpetrating. I'm like, Larry, you know Social Security probably better than almost anybody, and yet when it comes to retirement, your blinders are on. We're all doomed. It's the weirdest thing, man.
Well, the one way to think about it is, just a first set of facts is that retirement savings today are higher than they've ever been.
Absolutely.
And I did a paper for AEI a few years ago where I combined savings people in retirement accounts, but with also the benefits people accrue under defined benefit pensions, because you want to catch both. They're both essentially retirement savings. You want to catch them both. So when you're looking at both of them, retirement savings are the highest on record in every age group, every income group, every educational group, every racial group. So we're saving more now than we ever did before. Now look at retirees today. Is there a retirement crisis? If you were really running out of money, what would you see?
Right, exactly.
You'd see bankruptcies. You'd see, you look at surveys and you'd expect these people to say, I'm running out of money, I'm really suffering. If you actually look in surveys of retirees, they say nothing of the sort. 95% or only about 5% say I'm really having a tough time, which is significantly lower than younger age groups. So if there's no crisis today, and there's not, and we're saving more today than we did in the past, and look, longevity is increasing. It's not increasing that much. Retirement plan assets today, DB plus DC, are something like 6 times higher than they were in the 1970s, back when traditional pensions were at their peak.
Right.
It's, again, there are people falling through the cracks. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah.
But when you get people who say the whole system has failed, then they'll propose these massive changes that won't necessarily help the people who are currently falling through the cracks. So it's just focus on who is in fact having trouble and then do stuff to fix them. Probably those retirement. to be frank, that's going to be a Social Security issue or what's called SSI, a
It
supplemental
is.
security income. It's not an issue of you didn't save enough for retirement. It's just, they're just separate things. But people really have a tough time handling all this stuff. The basic narratives are so easy, but all the data analysis is so hard. People are, yeah, I'll just go to the easy one.
Yeah, it reminds me of COVID. We got to vax everybody because we have, people with more morbidities and stuff. It reminds me of Obamacare. We got to destroy the private insurance because we have, 10% of the population uninsured, and yet we still have 8% of the population. It's the big stick, man.
Yeah, just fix the problems that you've got.
What I'm saying, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. So on top of that, I was going to say too, it's like with your writing in this book. I mean, has AEI have you had any reception? Have you had any way to go speaking at tours or anything? Are you kind of on your own with your book, or how does it work in terms of getting the word out there?
Oh, well, you do. I mean, I do have a variety of events. I mean, I was in DC last month, speaking at some conferences on stuff. And so I would kind of do a lot of this speaking anyway. But it just gets me a little bit more inspired to go out, talk to different groups. Some of the writing I'm doing draws from the book in the sense of, okay, I got to, put this stuff out there now. And so it's, and to a certain degree, you're doing what you always did, because it's not like I was holding back before, but it just gives you something to promote to people and say, look, if you really want all of this, and I mean, the irony, of course, is no sooner do you publish the book than you start thinking of other things that you want to write about. But look, if you read the book, it will be helpful to you in financial planning to have that understanding, so you're not freaking out when, I think you understand most of the financial planners who are on, YouTube or whatever, love to sell the scare stuff. And so if you read the book, you can go about your financial planning with a more realistic view of what's actually happening. But it's also just good to know, okay, when I say the real retirement crisis, I'm talking about things like Social Security, Medicare, and all that. Now, I don't think they're going to cut benefits in any substantial way. But here's one way to think about it, though. When we get to Social Security, the trust fund goes insolvent 2033. Well, if the government just says, oh, we're going to borrow all this money, that's not, if you're a retiree, there's a risk to you from that, in the sense that we kick ourselves in some sort of financial crisis by borrowing to pay your Social Security. Okay, your Social Security benefits may be okay, but what's going to happen to your portfolio?
No, that's what I'm saying.
We have to be thinking about all of this stuff together. But I just think it's really, I'm going to turn 65 in the mid-2030s. I'm not losing sleep over my Social Security benefits being cut. I do lose sleep over the government going insolvent, though. And so it's these macro issues that really matter. But it's also understanding, where do those macro problems come from, which is just, higher and higher. The
thing is, no one ever says, Andrew, Social Security is going insolvent. No one ever says the Department of Defense is going insolvent. That's what always kind of pisses me off. Wait a second. The Department of Defense, Department of Education, none of these government entities are running surpluses themselves. So if you're going to, why are we just focus on this one thing as opposed to the whole government as a whole? Nothing is being paid for. You see what I'm saying? But yet somehow Social Security seems to be the one thing that everyone wants to focus on. It's very odd.
But I think the dynamic can go in two ways. In the sense of, and you can do this by comparing, say, Social Security in the U.S. to pension plans in other countries.
Yeah.
Social Security's got this idea, it's an earned benefit. Right. You paid for this money. There's this trust fund. Right. You're just getting back the money you paid in. That creates this moral claim to benefits, which makes it very, very tough to cut. Yeah. But
just like FDR wanted, that's what he wanted, man. Yeah. He said it. They'll never.
Part of that moral claim is that you in fact funded this system, that it is, that it's not running deficits and all that, that it's self-supporting. So that's one way of thinking about it, that, as long as the system is self-supporting, this moral claim, I think, is reasonable.
Right.
If you look in other countries, say Great Britain or something, they have some sort of trust fund, but nobody pays attention to it. There, if the costs are rising, and they say, if the costs are rising at some point we think is too much, then okay, we're going to reduce benefits. But there really isn't this perception you earned your benefits. It's not pure welfare, but it's you don't have this strong moral claim on it. So then that's fine. So you say, okay, it's not going to go broke, but it's just a cost thing. So there's two different ways you can think about it. The the problem with Social Security is people think they've paid for their benefits when they haven't paid for their benefits.
Exactly.
I mean, if we all paid for our benefits, the system wouldn't be going broke. And I mean, I did a piece in the Journal, Wall Street Journal, a couple of years ago where I looked at people retiring in the 2030s, right when the trust fund's going to run out. And they're like, I earned my benefits. You can't cut my benefits. If you look at numbers from the Congressional Budget Office, these people are promised a third more in benefits than they paid in taxes over their lifetimes, including if you had interest on those taxes. So the thing is, no, you in fact didn't pay for your benefits. 100%. I'm not saying we should just slash them, but we should get away from this, idea of this moral claim thing, because it's.
I completely agree.
We didn't. Again, if everybody paid for it, the thing wouldn't be going broke. It's 25 trillion short, so we got some tough decisions to make.
Well, if everyone paid for it, we would not be getting the benefits we're getting. That's just a fact. I mean, because inherently you can't. They paid that whatever that lady was, the first lady got it. She didn't pay anything. You know what I'm saying? So
she didn't pay for benefits.
Right, exactly. So we literally.
Ida Mae Fuller.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's what it was. She didn't pay. It was like, no.
Yeah, but that deal can't continue.
Right,
it's
exactly.
The Ponzi scheme analogy is not quite right. On the other hand, the first generation of Ponzi scheme gets the sort of rewards that Ida Mae Fuller got. I mean, people are like, oh, Social Security is so popular in its early years. Like, well, free money isn't that popular. But it becomes this seesaw where if you're giving people money on one end, you got to be taking it from people on the other. It all has to add up in some sense.
That's amazing.
We're on the wrong end of that now.
When they gave it to you for free, that's popular. Shocking.
Yeah.
What's funny too, Andrew, is I was reading the Vanguard study that I just read today how America saved. This is a 2025 one. All right, so their median contribution to their defined contribution plan, and they got millions of beneficiaries, participants, was about 12% of their salary between them and their employer. All right, so I'm sitting there thinking that's interesting. So the median contribution of the employer and the participant is about 12, and then on top, the 12.4% of Social Security. So for Vanguard's millions of participants, they're basically putting 25% of their salary. That's the employer and employee. But mind you, that's the money the employer pays that they're not paying as a benefit in terms of salary. And I'm like, how much more does Teresa, Alicia, the Wolf guy, and all these guys, how much more blood do they want to make this work? Because if we're giving a quarter of our income away and it's still dying on the vine, giving 50%, then we'd have no, what I'm saying, that we're going to be eating ramen noodles, man. I was laughing at
If you look at the combination of, say, the Social Security payroll tax rate, and then you put in on top of it the amount that people and their employers are contributing to retirement plans. You look at that over time, we are saving dramatically more for retirement today than we did in the past.
Exactly.
But to touch on the article that you cited the other day, the guy is saying, oh, you're not going to, the 70% replacement rate isn't right. Well, look at what you just cited. Between Social Security and retirement savings, you're putting in 25% of your salary for retirement. Well, guess what you stop doing when you retire? That 25% you're no longer paying. So you're at a 75% replacement rate before you've cut any spending due to having paid off your home or no more work costs or whatever, or lower federal income taxes, etc. So, it's you have to ask yourself, if everything is so bad, why are most retirees financially satisfied? And they are. And so you say, well, maybe people think, sometimes say, oh, you need to have an income equal to 90% of your pre-retirement earnings. It's just not so. And, there's a variety of ways you can show it. But one is very few, actual retirees have that. And they all say they're doing fine. And they have tons of disposable income. I'll just give you an example. It's, I live in the West Coast in Oregon. So for like spring break, instead of going to Florida, which is what we did, I'm from New York. So, Florida would be the East Coast thing. Hawaii is the West Coast thing. And so there we go to Kauai, which is one of the it's kind of a rural island. It's a little bit, you'd think it was pricier than some of the others. So I'm down at the pool or the hot tub, I'm just sitting there, you're talking to people. I'm talking to some guy. And you'd think, oh, this guy, he must be, some, high-end doctor or lawyer. He's like a plumber from Connecticut or something. It's, and he has enough money to go halfway around the world to sit in a hot tub. It's just, I'm not downplaying. Look, we do have people with problems, but compared to the past or compared to retirees in other countries, American retirees are really doing very well. But it's like you can't, some people can't take yes for an answer.
Right, 100%,
Can't
man.
take success for an answer.
Right.
And so you sure fix the problems where they are, but people, it's like some sort of mental illness where they just can't say it's working.
Well, the thing about that article that pissed me off is they said, "Oh, you think you need 70% of pre-retirement spending?" I said, "No one ever said that. It's always pre-retirement income." So they're making a straw man. They're saying, "Oh, these people think you need 70% of your pre-retirement spending." I said, "No, that's never been."
Guys, I mean, this is the problem with a lot of this retirement stuff is people who know just enough to be sort of dangerous with it. You know, if you just don't know anything at all, you're like, I don't know, and let's go figure it out. But people, they've got this preconception of it's all shit. And a lot of it comes from people who sort of worked in the sort of defined benefit world. You know, they came up to this world where you really had a system. You had Social Security and you had this pension plan that you were automatically enrolled in. You had no control of it, but we controlled everything for you. And we thought that system worked. And, you know, for some people it did, for most people it didn't. But the point is that gets sort of superseded by 401ks, IRAs, and so forth. And they're nervous about it. And, you know, retirement consultants like systems. They don't like people just choosing what they want to do, as they can't believe this thing is in fact working. But literally, you know, there was something, it was just some article recently. So, well, the shift from DB to defined contribution, you know, 401k accounts. Oh, that's terrible, because with a DB plan, your employer, they paid for everything themselves. You know, you didn't have to pay for anything. Or you could say, look, if you have a 401k, the employer pays in and you pay in. And as a result of that, we're saving a ton more for retirement than we used to. You can look at it, a lot of it when you look at sort of when you're trying to pinpoint medians and stuff using survey data, it's hard because the survey data is terrible. But if you look at just total amounts that are paid into, say, private sector retirement plans as a percentage of total private sector wages, see, these aggregate amounts are accurate. In 1975, it was something like 5.8% of wages went into these plans. And that includes people who weren't participating in plans. They're just totals over totals. Today, it's around 9%. So it's basically, that's a 50% increase, you know, as a percentage for wages that are people saving for retirement. So it's just, you know, these are the sorts of things where if you say, well, we're not saving enough for retirement, we're saving 50% more. How much more?
That's what I'm saying. But I think it's philosophical. I don't think a lot of these are academics who don't like people with individual rights, essentially. And I don't mean like they're communists. I'm just saying they, like you said, their status. They like it from defined top down. They don't like bottom up. It makes them very nervous.
If you go back, say early 2000s, when like the behavioral economics started coming out. You know, this was okay. And look, there's some good things like automatic enrollment 401ks by and large. Good
absolutely.
But what came out from this was, okay, people don't act in economically rational ways. They act according to just habits or prejudices or guesses. Therefore, they can't be trusted. Now, as it happens, a lot of the behavioral econ stuff is just falling apart. It's really, I mean, I think Thaler got his Nobel Prize, but it doesn't hold up that well in retrospect. And especially if you think about low income people, you know, everybody's saying, oh, you know, these guys, they should be saving for retirement. Oh, they're not. We need to put them in an IRA or whatever. But if you look at a textbook sense, if you're somebody in the bottom 20% of the population, Social Security is going to replace around 80% of your pre-retirement earnings. Your Medicare is going to be paid for. Medicaid is going to cover your Medicare premiums and your long-term care. And somebody like that's poor. They don't have a lot. I'm not saying they're rich, but the case that they should be saving more for retirement on their own, which means they're worse off during their working years, can't buy a home or put a kid in college. It's just not there. And so it's a lot of people who think they know better than these poor people. Telling the poor people, you're wrong, when in fact the poor people are doing pretty much what an econ textbook would tell them to do.
Well, that's one of my frustrations about Kolikoff. He wrote Scott Burns, Larry Kolikoff, you know, was spend till the end. And it's like, he made the exact points that we're making here. And I was like, dude, Larry, that when people and their kids get out of the house, when blah, 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 that their income is going to meet their spending is going to meet whatever you see what I'm saying? It's like, this. And I was like, that's why
and I don't know with him. I mean, I use his retirement planning software, which is this sort of econ life cycle model based stuff, which basically tells me I should be shoveling money out the window that I save too much. But what you want to see is, okay, apply that to a cross section of the population. And what is that going to tell us?
Right.
My guess is it's not going to tell you that, the vast majority of people are undersaving. I just don't, so that's the question you want to answer. And I guess, I could take the software and say, okay, instead of me, let's put in some random other person. What should they be doing? But I think for a lot of people, they're doing what is in fact optimal for them to be doing.
But that's not rational according to behavioral economics, which is why behavioral economics has fallen apart. You know what I'm saying? Because it's, again, I get, Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize too at some point, and some of his stuff has fallen apart. It's just very interesting. Some of these things on the behavioral psychology and philosophy and economics is.
I mean, just an example on the behavioral economics stuff. It's just interesting. There's a good paper done, and look, I'll give the credit. You sort of this kind of Harvard group, and they're kind of disparate places now, but who started this stuff. And they've, to their credit, they've done subsequent studies. Most academics, when they've made their name on something, they will never show the contrary information. These guys will. But they did an interesting study. This is maybe 10 years ago, where they looked at automatic enrollment of civilian, like Department of Defense employees into the federal thrift savings plan, which is their 401k. And when you do that, there's like, okay, lo and behold, more people are participating in the TSP, their savings rise and all that, which is, that's the standard behavioral econ auto enrollment story.
Right.
But they also had access to these people's credit reports. So they can see, well, what else is happening in household finance? And for people in the middle, it was fine. It didn't change very much. For people at the bottom, which is what auto enrollment is really aimed at, you found balances for like auto loans and home mortgages increased.
Yeah,
so they're saving more in one place, they're dissaving in another.
Yeah.
What that shows is they're balancing this stuff out. They're acting rationally.
Right, 100%.
And so, but this idea that these people are all irrational, they should be saving more. If we just pushed them, they would do it. They're like, I'm going to undo that. And it makes sense. If auto enrollment might make sense. You get the match or whatever. But if you don't have money to put food on the table, okay, let's save less somewhere else, which is precisely what they were doing. So it's some of that stuff is this vindication of your sort of standard kind of neoclassical, rational man sort of economics. And it's just interesting to have out there. And I'm, grateful these guys are willing to do this sort of work and, and they've also shown, for instance, if you automatically enroll people in 401ks, sure, they sign up quicker. And you're like, oh, it's a dramatic increase among new hires. Great. But a lot of those people, if they're not saving today, they're going to start saving tomorrow. Right. So the long-term implications are not as big. So I'm not saying it's useless. I'm fine with it. Yeah. But the idea that this sort of says, okay, standard economics just doesn't work, which is, what tons of newspaper reporters want to do because they don't like, standard economics. Right. It's just too much of a pain in the neck to do. But in fact, it mostly does work. And
that's interesting because along those lines, that Vanguard thing it was funny. I'd say, because there's a balance sheet, assets, liabilities. So the Vanguard folks, I love Vanguard, cut my teeth at Vanguard. I'm a big fan of John Bogle, got a sign. Anyway, if you only focus on the auto enrollment and seeing the assets go up, you're like, hey, that works. Oh, but there's a liability side of this. You can't overlook the liability side that my car loans, my credit cards are going up. And if you do, you're not showing the whole picture, which is, again, going back to Kolikoff, which is a book spending.
Yeah, you need to look at all of it. So it's fascinating stuff. And it's just, from a researcher standpoint, just doing what I do every day, it's a great way to make a living. I mean, it's just really, really interesting stuff.
No, that's
You
fine.
feel like you're contributing some knowledge to people, but it's just every day you are in fact learning something, because people's lives are complicated.
Absolutely.
We're interesting, and so it's a fascinating thing to work on. But any sort of simple solutions or easy explanations usually don't hold up very well.
All right, so let's see. We got a couple comments here, guys. If you got questions for Andrew or comments you want him to address, just make sure you put in all caps. So my man Scott says, I like your take on this, Andrew. The 800-pound gorilla in the room is home affordability. The younger generation is priced out of the market. Private equity is killing first-time home buyers. I would like to hear your thoughts on affordability of homes. I don't know if you looked much into that, but that is a concern of mine, frankly. Any thoughts?
Thinking about it, I do think I do think the private equity stuff is overstated. I don't think they're a big enough player in the market.
Completely agree.
I mean, I do think in certain parts of the country, especially urban areas, look, they should be building more. The question is what, every liability, it's the homes. There's somebody on both sides of the equation.
Right.
In the sense of if home prices are going up, okay, well, it's harder for you to get in at the bottom, but it's better for you if you already own one, which is, could contribute to this sort of age gradient of wealth, right? That the older people are wealthier now, as the Wolf study showed, but relatively compared to younger people. And home equity has something to do with it, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. But in my general preference, build more homes. And it's, some places it doesn't matter but if you're in, San Francisco, or, I'm in Oregon, if you're in Portland, just freaking build some more homes for people.
Well, doesn't Portland have crazy restrictions on building? Like they say you can't build anymore or something like that?
Well, but it's okay. But as I just said, there's buyers and there's sellers. It's the people who own the homes don't want more homes built near them. And probably it's for social reasons. They don't want low income people near them. They're all very progressive. Like, I just don't want poor people near me. Right. But it's just, if you own gold, you don't want to have somebody digging up more gold, because it reduces the value of your asset. And so there's some of that. And at some point we got to say, look, people got to have a place to live.
Right.
So, but I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling for how that has affected kind of retirement readiness. And, plus you're going to get, some of this money for the older generation. They're not going to spend this stuff. And again, money can go somewhere. And, it's not a perfect system, but some of this is going to flow back to the next generation. So that may make up for some of it, but I get the issue.
I don't think the private equity is nearly as big as issue as people are making.
And what are they going to do? It's okay. They private equity buys your house. Well, look, the fact is private equity doesn't change anything fundamental, that they don't make money by having nobody living in the house or nobody buying the house. They got to sell it the same as everybody else. Private equity is sort of the corporate structure stuff.
Yeah,
so I just, it's, maybe a player some places, but my knowledge of it, I've never, to the degree I've looked at, I've never found a really convincing case that these guys are big villains versus the not in my backyard stuff. That's a big villain.
Or the regulations that now you need solar panels, now you can't have natural gas, you got to have this, you got to have that. It's like, yeah, man, I was reading some study, I forgot what it was, says the regulations are adding like 40% to the cost of a new home in California. Yeah. I was like, don't blame freaking, as much as I hate BlackRock and Larry Fink, don't blame BlackRock for that, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
so we just have to get serious about that. But it's all, and you hear some of the right things coming from some of the right people. When I got Elizabeth Warren out there saying we're going to make it easier to buy homes, okay, that's a good sign. But it's always, you got to say, well, why is it hard to buy one today? And that's when you get into these issues that are more politically intractable.
Well, they better, that is a big deal. My own daughter is going through that right now. She makes good money. She's like, Dad, it's not cheap out there like it used to be. I said, nah, we've heard that. I get it. And she's right. But with that said, it's not impossible to buy a house, but she does make pretty good money. So it's kind of like if you're, anyway. All right. So my man, Freedom Acres says, Does Andrew think we will get cuts to Social Security as the funding gets even worse?
Unfortunately, I don't. And the thing is, I said earlier, I'm going to retire mid 2030s. I'm not particularly worried about it. I'm the person they should be cutting. If you're somebody who really depends on Social Security, the chance they're going to cut your benefits is very, very small.
I completely agree.
The issue is, what do you do longer term? And the issue comes down to, as far as I can see, is this. It's like if you've got a high income couple today, they're going to get about $100,000 in Social Security benefits. Now, I get, okay, they paid in over their lifetime. You don't want to do that. And you don't want to pull the rug out from them. But not in a million years would anybody in their right mind set up a system that says, okay, we're going to pay $100,000 a year to people, to high income retirees.
Right.
Those people can save on their own. So over the long term, look, we got to scale that down. But you do need a strong safety net. So I just don't worry too much about that. What I worry about, though, is Congress not coming to some package of tax increases and benefit cuts and just borrowing the money instead. If you think about like some of these economic models that are used for debt sustainability, I mean, the Congressional Budget Office has one, like the Wharton, they call the Penn-Wharton budget model, and they'll do stuff that say, well, if we keep going along our current debt path, the model crashes. It can't solve the problem. And the way these economic models work is, because they're all forward-looking, they're really like rational agents and all that. And what they had for the model to solve, they have to assume that at some point the federal government rationalizes its finances.
Right.
And the reason for that is, if they don't, then the federal government won't be able to pay its debt in the long term, which means that because people are rational, they should start demanding a higher risk premium today, which means if people don't believe that the government's going to solve this thing, say 10 or 20 years from now, you have a financial crisis today if they're rational.
Yes.
And so the fact that we don't is partly indicates people think, okay, the federal government's going to solve this thing. But if come 2035 or whenever, the federal government says, well, look, we've known for half a century we had to raise tax or cut benefits, but instead we're just going to borrow the money. That is the signal to the markets. These guys are not going to come up with a solution. And that's when you get the hell out. Because they're just not, because it's one thing to say we're borrowing. Look, the trust fund is redeeming bonds now. We borrow to repay the trust fund. Fine. It's, but it's that has a limited window to it. 2033, it runs out and you're done. If your long-term solution is to borrow money that everybody knows you can't pay back, the question is, why would you lend to them? And that's when you get the budget crisis, the financial crisis. That's what kills your portfolio outside of Social Security. So some people are thinking about just their Social Security. I'll just borrow money. What do I care? Well, you should care, because you're an investor. And that's going to screw up financial markets.
And no, 100%. And then just think even worse, though, if the government can't get together to fix this blindingly obvious problem, and they just, borrow money, like they can't fix anything then. And as such, there's no reason to think that they'll be able to get anything done. And just think about the massive sell-off of government bonds then, because then you're thinking for everything they're just going to borrow. You see what I'm saying? At least now we can pretend
Social Security is not a complicated problem.
Right.
Social Security is hard because it's very politically salient. I mean, you get your Social Security statement that says you're going to get X dollars. With Medicare, they don't say you're going to get dollars. Right. They say we're going to give you some service. And there's sort of the BS factor. Right, well, using efficiencies, we're going to give you better services, more money. And maybe you are, maybe you're not. But you can get people to go along with it. With Social Security, reform is hard because there's dollars and cents that people can understand. Nevertheless, it's an easily understandable problem. I mean, when people say, oh, what should I read to understand the Social Security problem? Like, read the New York Times like 1990 or something. It hasn't changed in a fundamental way. But it's, the problem, we all know.
Right.
The problem you face is, and people say it's a lack of political courage. Well, sure it is. But it's also Americans themselves don't want to solve it. Right. I may have told you this before, but I ran a little sort of spreadsheet exercise a while ago where I said, what would have happened in the beginning of 1984 is when the long-term deficit for Social Security started to reappear, and it would creep up each year. One way to fix that, just raise the payroll tax rate by whatever amount you need, and just incrementally raise it a little bit more.
Right.
If you did that, somebody retiring in the 2030s, they'd have nothing to worry about. Trust fund would be solvent, blah, blah, blah. But for a middle income person over the course of their life, they would have paid something like $130,000 more in payroll taxes. If you're somebody at the tax max at the top, you would have paid $350 more.
Right.
Now, here's the deal is you say, oh, well, they're assured they're going to get their benefits. Guess what? They're probably going to get their benefits anyway. And that guy in the middle saved himself 125 grand. The person at the top saved himself 350. So it's not simply, just this abstract political card. It was this game of chicken that people paid. I remember back in, say, when Clinton was doing the Social Security stuff, this is, say, 98, 99, and he would warn, look, if we don't fix the trust fund, if we're either going to pay more in or we're going to cut your benefits. America's like, we're not paying more in. Nobody wanted to raise taxes. But they're also like, we dare you to cut our benefits.
Right.
Look where we are today. I mean, I worked for George W. Bush. He would have cut your benefits.
Hey.
Trump doesn't want to cut your benefits. Biden and Harris don't want to cut your benefits. They play the game of chicken. They are going to win that. So it's terrible public policy, but they made the rational choice financially.
It's don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. You know what I'm saying? Like that's, if I can get $135,000,
the guy behind the tree is your kids and your grandkids.
Well, somebody. So along the lines, my man says, how likely you think they are to raise the full retirement age to 70 and eliminate this wage cap and the tax law? You think that's a likely thing to happen?
I would be not surprised to see the retirement age go up. Whether it goes all the way to 70, I don't know. I mean, that fixes less of the problem than you think. Raising it 2 years to 69, the numbers I saw, that would fix less than 1/5 of the problem.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where, just to put that in context, you have a lot of people, mostly on the left, who are like, oh, Social Security, there's not that big a funding gap. And I'm like, okay, raise the retirement age by 2 years, over which people freak out. That fixes like 18% of the problems. That gives you some context. The tax max, I won't be surprised to see it go up. I don't really think it should go up, and I give you some very technical reasons for that. But it's like a pound of flesh thing. If you're a Republican, you want Democrats to agree some benefit cuts, then you got to give them something. And that's something they really want. Yeah. But here's the deal: is if you just eliminate it, that's a 12 percentage point increase in the effective top tax rate on earned income. So then you're like, people go, say Scandinavian levels, except it's not, because the Scandinavians don't do that anymore. It's just, but the irony, though, is this is just a preview of a piece I'm working on. If you look at the state-by-state incidence of doing that, it's like the SALT thing. It really hits your Connecticut's, New York's, California's, Illinois. It's not much in your Mississippi's. So this gets, just politically speaking, this gets this sort of new dynamic of the Republican Party, where if you went back to George W. Bush's day, he was like, I'm not doing it because it's just terrible economic policy, which in fact it is. But if you're Trump, he's like, look, it screws people who aren't going to vote for me anyway. So what do I care? So that changes dynamic. I'd still be surprised to see it eliminated, because that's a huge tax hook, and that's especially for small business owners, Andrew. The small business owners are going to get and it would fix half of the gap. But again, it would be an enormous tax increase, one of the biggest tax increases in history, focused on a tiny number of people, and we fix half the gap. So for people saying, oh, it's not such a big deal, I'm like, look, you figure out how to pay for this thing.
If you're a small business,
really tough.
And you're making $300,000 a year, you know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden you got to pay an extra 12.4% on the amount above 178 to that 300,000. That's a big flipping tax. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big tax, man.
Yeah, and the real money, some of these plans would exempt. You have this donut hole between the current 175 and like $400,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that exempts the people in the middle, although it's temporary because it shrinks. But you only hit people over 400. The problem is that doesn't get you nearly as much money. It's
Right.
really those people in the middle, like your
Right.
school principal or whatever, somebody who's like, high income, but not, it's the difference between somebody who might occasionally fly first class and somebody's private jet or something.
Yeah.
They think it's the private jet class, but to really solve it, you got to hit those people who are, in most contexts, upper middle class.
I think most people are
definitely well off, but they're not just people who don't think about money at all.
I think most people are stunned when you say, like, I can't remember if it's a 10 or 1%. I think it's like the 1%. Their median income is like $580,000 bucks. I forgot what it was. I'm like, it's not like the 1% isn't freaking Montgomery Burns. You know what I'm saying? Now the 1% is, but the 1% is just not. My man, Ted,
it could happen, but I'm one, maybe a bit, but
I think there'll be some negotiation there. We'll raise it, but we're not going to freaking limit the cap and raise the retirement age. And, everyone's going to take a loss there. But I mean, something's got to be done. I mean, look, man, I don't think anyone is going to disagree that something's got to be done. And, Clinton raised the taxes, on the bend point, someone right here, my man, Ted from Maine. So if they're from Maine, Andrew, they're smart and more smart than anybody else, especially someone from New York who lives in Oregon. Okay. So it's Mainers.
Smarter than me, apparently.
It's much smarter. Exactly. So speaking of which, will provisional income bands ever be indexed to inflation? And that's, so right now we got the bend points essentially, and he's like, that's been set since 1983. You think that'll ever change? I don't think it ever will. Do you think it ever will be changed in terms of adjusting?
No, I mean, the bend points change. The bands where you start paying income taxes don't, but that was deliberate. Yes. It was, the point was they wanted to tax benefits, which, look, if you need the money, you need the money. Right. And there was some rationale for taxing half of it because half the money going in is not taxed. So you make some rationale. The real rationale is they need the money. Right. And so the idea was just don't index it. And that's how the phase-in works. Yeah. And, this stuff going on now where Trump's trying to get rid of it. I mean, it's just dumb. I mean, I know people don't want to pay taxes on their benefits, but look, the median retiree in the US is like the richest in the world. So and we're going broke. So look, we got to be adults about this thing. So my guess is, the Trump stuff was temporary because they can't afford to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is when you see all these temporary things. Look, if we had plenty of money to make it permanent, we would have made it permanent. But they can't, and so they don't. So I wouldn't be surprised. Look, I think they should all be taxed, and we got to get money back somehow. And look, that's just the deal. It's just this thing's going broke. We got to get money back somehow. The taxation, the incentive stuff is a little bit weird. And I've seen some studies that kind of go either way on the incentives to present for working or saving retirement. But so I would just be surprised to see it eliminated. It might just hold. It may just sort of revert to current law and go with that. Where gradually more and more people pay taxes on their benefits. But you're still paying taxes at a low rate. It's not a huge amount of money. You just don't want to do it. And I get people don't want to do it. But look, you paid taxes on your contributions going in. The employer side was not taxed. So for the half of it to be taxed makes sense. When they're going up to 85%, the Medicare share, that's just because they needed the money. And that's how things work.
The funny thing on the tax, there are ways to. I agree with what Ted's saying. Is like at the end of the day, we don't want to pay tax. But there are ways not to pay tax, and that's just to do your Roth and then live off Social Security in your Roth IRA, and then you paid your tax on the front end, but now you retire without tax. So there are ways to do that, which along the lines goes to this question right here. This guy, cohort 61, will Roth accounts cause revenue shortfalls in the future? Will it cause income qualified benefits to skew to people who could afford it? I'm thinking IRMA and other revenue from retirement folks. So I get IRMA, but will you think Roth accounts will cause revenue shortfalls in the future because of all the tax-free growth of retirement accounts?
Sure. Yeah. And that's, I don't want to say that's the point, but when, I just got asked about something recently about shifting, say, IRAs, 401ks to full Roth tax status. When politicians propose that, they're not proposing it for you; they're proposing it for them. And it's the idea is they want to front load the taxes,
right?
And because they need the revenues today because they want their 10-year budget numbers to add up. So that means they're going to get less in the future. It is, from the point of view of the federal budget as a whole, it's the same as just borrowing. It's just taking, say, we're going to have more money today, less money in the future. That's just, if you borrow to increase the budget deficit, you have more money today, less money in the future. That's what they're doing. Yeah. So it'll get dressed up in the stuff. Oh, it's good for you. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking they need money.
100%.
And so it's possible, but the budget baseline, say from CBO, would already include the current level of Rothification. They're modeling all that stuff. Right. But if you went to full Roth, well, what you do is you just say, okay, what is the increase in revenues in the near term? And then in the future, it will be the deduction, or the decrease will be the near-term increases times whatever interest rate you assume they get, basically.
Let's just going back to the politicians want the money now. I don't remember Jerry Brown in California. So they had a budget surplus for a couple of years because they had that 2-year time frame where you could do this like mass Roth conversions, this capital gain tax thing, and all these guys were like, I'm going to take the tax now. These big heavy hitters in Silicon Valley and whatnot do massive Roth conversions. It's like 2011 and 12. And it really generated a lot of positive revenue for California, which gave him a surplus that he could run on. So he's like, look at us, we got a surplus. So you're like, dude, it's a temporary thing, man. It's like, yeah. But
yeah, and I am not a financial planner, certified or otherwise. But I'm saying, when I think about this stuff, and I think understanding the kind of macro level issues we're facing makes you think of different kinds of risks you might face in retirement and saying, how do you hedge those risks? Yeah. So it's, whether you should do a Roth conversion today, I'm not the guy to talk to on that. But it's worth thinking about. Let's say you do Roth, and you're like, okay, well, I'm paying the tax now, so no tax later. Well, what if they double cross you? What if they put in, they're like, because of all these Roth conversions, we don't have any money, we're going to put in a VAT. Right. So then they're getting you both ways. Right. So it's one of these things that you got to understand. You're in an environment where these guys will be strapped for cash.
100%.
And they're going to have to do something. And so part of it is, how do you protect yourself?
The VAT, man, that's a great, man. If the Democrats get back in, we're going full European style with the VAT right there. So your Roth might be tax-free, but now you're paying a consumption tax on top of that.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, it's just, I'm just full of like these side notes, and, may or may not be relevant to anything. But I just say, I grew up in New York. I did most of my education. I would undergrad in Ireland, and then my master's and PhD is in England. And I don't think they consider themselves to be European. A ton of European people there. The difference between Europeans and sort of U.S. progressives, if you talk to a German, they're like, look, I'm happy to pay the taxes because I know I'm getting decent services. Your U.S. progressives aren't like that. Your Bernie Sanders thinks there's this billionaire who's buying the tree who's going to pay. It's like, no, everybody has to pay it. Right. And so it's just it's a different kind of thing that Americans want European levels of services without the 20% VAT or the income taxes that kick in at very low income levels. At the end of the day, whatever you think of the European system, at least they found some way to pay for it.
Yeah, it's egalitarian for sure, man. It's just like they say, hey, if I want the potholes, I got to pay something for it. Right. And we're like, no. My man actually makes a good point here. This guy's from Connecticut. He says, regarding Social Security, kicking the can down the road, it's just like reserve funds at condos. No one wants to pay the roof replacement in 2045. And so, we're just going to say, we're going to keep pushing it down the road. And then 2045 comes, we get a $70,000 assessment to redo the pipes. But everyone's like, if we only would have paid $5,000 today, we could have avoided that $70,000 in the future.
If you think about, say, like traditional defined benefit pensions are regulated, certain contribution requirements you have to make every year. This is private sector. The state and local are unregulated, and so of course they're terrible. But if you're running a private pension, there's things you have to do because they understand the incentives are not to fund things. Everybody likes to promise things without paying for them. So if you're running this pension, it's really pretty strict what you have to contribute. What these guys forget is the exact same incentives are there for Social Security, for anything else the government does. They want to promise it. They don't want to pay for it. So something like say Social Security, literally we've gone over 40 years knowing we have this long-term funding gap and doing nothing about it. If you're a private pension, you got to get yourself back to essentially to full funding in like 7 years or something. And for government, they're like, oh, well, we're okay. I'm like, no, you're not okay. It is simply saying we can steal from the future because that's what you're doing. And so it's when I think about what Social Security reform should look like, there's, okay, what does our product want to be? And, people can differ on that. But I think what we should agree is whatever happens, we should be having to make adjustments periodically and not kick the can down the road, because that's exactly how we got where we are. Where we got where we are is this function of just not wanting to do anything. And then the problem gets bigger and bigger. So you should simply have to adjust your contribution rates, your benefits every year, and just do it that way. Because the incentives are just as bad for politics. I mean, they're worse for politicians. At least in like a perfect market for a company, if they have a pension plan, they underfund it, that may get reflected in their stock price because you understand that they've got this liability. With government, nobody knows or cares, so then they do it even more. So it's just understanding human nature and saying, look, we got to do something about that.
Well, that's why I like going back to your German example. I like the payroll tax increase. Everyone's got skin in the game, man. You know what I'm saying? If
you're going to raise taxes, just raise the payroll tax rate. And people are like, oh, we don't want to do it. I'm like, well, look, everybody's argument for why you can't cut benefits is we're all in together. We all paid. I'm like, okay, so this thing is underfunded. What happened to we're all in it together? We all paid. Like, no, I can't have that. Somebody else has got to pay for it. I'm like, come on.
What's that billionaire? And look, I'm all okay. I agree with you and Alicia that we should get rid of the tax deferred amounts on tax deductions, 401k contributions. I'm not against raising taxes, some things, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, man, we all got to pay for this stuff. We all in it together. So if I got to pay more, you should have to pay more too.
We just need to have an adult conversation about what you're going to do.
But Trump is the adult in the room.
Yeah.
I love Trump, but I don't think Trump's the guy to be the adult in the room, or Kamala, or maybe
Trump's got very short time horizons. He cares about stuff that happens between now and the time he leaves office. Anything after that, not really. So it's just, you just got to understand that's what you're dealing with. Social Security is not going to get fixed by him because he doesn't care.
No, he 100%. And he's what, 85 years old or something like that. I mean, look, I'm a Trumper. That's all there is. All right, last question. We'll get you out of here, Andrew. What do you think of eliminating the cap and adding a third bend point with a fourth bend point with a 2% benefit?
I, in general, disagree with eliminating the cap because I just think it's
huge tax.
It's a huge tax increase, is economically harmful, undermines the idea that we're paying for this themselves. Yeah. If I were going to eliminate the cap, I wouldn't do the 2%. What they're talking about right now, you get, the Social Security benefit formulas, 90% of your first $1,300 in monthly earnings, then 32% of up to $7,500 or something like that, 15% over that. But they're saying, okay, let's eliminate the cap, and anything over the cap, you get a 2% return on. I'm like, why? The only purpose to do that is to pretend that we're not breaking the link between, contributions and benefits. Like, but you are. It's a total fig leaf. It's like saying, well, it's like we're gonna have a 99% tax rate, but you get to keep 1%. It's like, well, just take it all then, so we know what's going on. So I just want clarity on what we're doing. And I'm even open to using general revenue to fund Social Security, but then don't tell me how you earned all your benefits. It's like, I don't have if you read the book, which you should, but I favor, moving to something like an Australian kind of system with essentially everybody has a 401k, means tested benefit, whatever. But you can go a whole variety of different ways, but let's just be honest about how we do it. And the 2% replacement factor. And I know people who really favor it. Like, we don't want to break the link between taxes and benefits. Like, come on. At 2% return, you've broken the link. So let's just stop lying to ourselves.
That's just at the end of the day, it's kind of like they're so desperate to get rid of the cap. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the idea of the link there, but it's just like they're so desperate to get rid of the cap. It's like, why even bother? My whole point is, why not be more European in this regard? Say we're all in it together. Let's raise payroll tax. That's
And I don't know of any. The funny thing is, I'm not an expert on what goes on in other countries. I know a bit, but I'm not an expert. But if you look at what progressives want Social Security to look like, it would be like the duck-billed platypus of the pension world. Like there's no other country that's anything remotely like this.
Right.
The European countries, most of them have a tax max, a tax cap lower than the US. Ours is actually relatively high, but in places where it's higher, the return that these high earners get is actually pretty good. You look at some of these systems like Sweden or Norway, they're not progressive at all, really. They're basically, it's like a universal pension plan. Yeah. So if you're a rich guy, you're like, okay, fine, maybe I'd prefer to put my money in a retirement account, but this is not a confiscatory tax. But what these guys are talking about is a confiscatory tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, if you're going to do it, then just make it a confiscatory tax. We all know. And that's not really it. But the interesting thing is, it's just, if you look at other countries, they don't do it the way these guys are talking about. I mean, they don't really do it the way we're doing it either, but it's what these, your Bernie Sanders proposing is just, it is like this platypus. You don't know what it is. Right. You're like, oh, it's a contributory system, except, okay, well, you have all these people paying money and they're getting nothing back on it. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense. So like in the book, what I say, coming out of the failure of the Bush reforms in 2005, one thing I really thought to myself on Social Security is back up and say, if you were inventing this system from scratch today, what would it look like? I mean, how do you do? I mean, I remember when I was in the White House, I was talking to a senior person. I asked him just rhetorically, why do we have a Social Security system? What do you want this thing to do? Right. And you get this look back, it's kind of blank. I'm like, oh, we're screwed. But knowing what you want the program to do, this is the federal government's biggest spending program, biggest tax most people pay, so on and so forth. People are concerned about keeping it solvent, whatever that means, but actually saying, well, what do you want this thing to do? Is it doing that effectively? Is it doing other things that it shouldn't be doing? And if so, how much money is that costing you? Nobody's asking those kinds of questions. And you would look, if this was some minor program, like, oh, whatever, who cares? Right. But this is the federal government's biggest program. So it's just, we just needs a little bit, put your thinking cap on and say, what do we have this thing for? What do we want to do? What are things that are best left just to individuals to decide on their own? And people can differ on that, but if you at least ask those questions, you'll come to some more rational answers about what Social Security reform should look like.
All right, Andrew, let's remind people. Sorry about the dogs there. You got dogs by chance?
Yeah, he's asleep in a basket, though.
I think he's always asleep. So Andrew's book, The Real Retirement Crisis, get it on Amazon and write it. If Drew is still on here, write a review, man. I just published a review on this right now on yours thing. Reviews are hugely helpful on Amazon, my friends. Hugely helpful. I'm just telling you right now with a number of
I'm going to write some sock puppet reviews for mine.
Get some thoughts out there, but Real Retirement Crisis. And the reason you want this, my friends, is because as you're talking to these fools who actually think that we're falling apart, this will give you chock full of data to say they're just wrong. I mean, they're just wrong, man. There's just no other way around it. It doesn't mean it's perfect. But, and just real quick, Andrew, the thing that pissed me off about the Europeans and Canadian system, we get paid a hell of a lot more in Social Security than those guys do. So one of the things we always forget is like, how much is our benefit relative to the average Englishman? It's a hell of a lot more.
It's much, much higher. Much higher.
Absolutely. So
my wife and I'll probably get 4 times as much as we would get in the UK. And the UK is a civilized country, but it's just one of those things.
Yep.
And so compared to Canada,
and when they gripe about it, I'm like, you realize we're getting a hell of a lot more than Canadians are. It's not even close. And then Andrew's Substack, and Andrew's been posting a lot on Substack, so follow him on the Substack too. But Andrew's American Enterprise Institute, and writes regularly in the Wall Street Journal and various retirement places as well. So Andrew, always appreciate it, my friend. Good stuff. And, yeah, man, I appreciate you jumping on board here. It's such a
I appreciate everybody taking a little time on your Labor Day to watch. And
hey, Labor Day, I could get my union. I'm a union of one.
Got me my day off. So
AEI gives you a day off. They give you how dare they?
As long as you do produce the goods, they don't care what you do. It's a great place.
Well, if you do get a chance, talk to Chauvin about what his thought about the
retirement. I'll ask him. I'm gonna see him next month at Stanford. So I'll ask him.
God bless, man. Appreciate it, Andrew.
Good to see you.
buddy.
Thank you,
sir.
everybody. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys. Bye-bye. All right, cool.